Welcome to Soul Brothers.
Oh, man, that was different this time.
I know. I was trying to be at least somewhat creative, you know?
I love it. I love it. It sounds like we were getting ready to rumble.
Yeah, I like that one. I used to do that before every sermon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and sometimes before worship. I would like gather everybody up and I'd be like, let's get ready to worship. Or sometimes if it was going to be all like quiety, soaky worship,
Yeah.
I'd say something like this. I'd say, everybody be very quiet. we're worshiping the Lord. So it just depended on what kind of worship mood I felt like Holy Spirit was in.
It's prophetic season.
Yeah, you know, like,
It's
are we
deliverance season.
Are we going crazy, or are we going to be very quiet? We're worshiping the Lord.
Oh, man. Hey, listen. I don't even know how you follow
When I did all this publicly, and I don't know, I thought it was totally normal at the time, and then you go to other churches and go, "Oh, this is supposed to be all like holy and serious."
You're not reverent.
I know, no.
Oh, man.
And I'm technically a reverend, so
I still say if I'm ever ordained, I want to be known as prime minister.
Nice. I said after I got ordained, I was like, now I'm a reverend, so you must revere me. And then when I got my master's degree, I said, you must now revere me as master. So, yeah, my wife thought that was awesome.
Oh, man. It's all downhill from that point today. So
where do you go from there?
Oh, man. Hey, listen, everybody, if you've been with us for the past few episodes, we have been talking about the prophetic, and then we've gone into visions. I think this is our third episode on visions. Yeah. We'll probably bridge from here to dreams. After dreams, we even know what we're going to do, at least for the next couple of episodes on our long list of things to talk about. So
yeah,
stick with us. If you haven't been listening, it might be good to go back and kind of get a foundation of where we are. I would recommend it at least. We've talked about different types of visions. We've talked about mental images. We've talked about open visions. We've talked about trances. We've talked about translocations. I mean, it's been all over the place. And it's, to be honest, everybody, it's been story time with Nathan.
And Keith. I like yours too.
Mine's kind of like, you remember when you went to the movies, like back in the day? It was probably before both of our times, really, but like you would go, I guess even in some Disney movies now, you can go and get like a little Pixar short before the main movie.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That was like a million years ago.
Yeah. But like, I think my story is more like the Pixar short. Yours is like the main event.
I don't think you should sell yourself Pixar short.
Well, they do win awards, so
that's true. I think you should totally win awards for that.
A participation trophy. That might be it sometimes, but I mean, I really think that we are in a time for more story time with Nathan, and so just full disclosure, there are moments I wish we had like a video camera running. Just to see, sometimes it's just to see my expression, because I wonder, what did I just do in response to what you just said? I mean, so I wish that we had a video camera a lot of times, because today would have been one of those times. We've talked about this before. We don't really prep at all.
Yeah.
At most, we say, what topic do you want to talk about?
Right.
And sometimes we're like right before we push record, we'll be like, who's going to talk first, right?
Yeah,
who's
right.
going
Let's
to
have a little bit of a plan.
yeah.
Maybe we should fast and pray.
Yeah. And then on things like today, where Nathan has this long scroll of stuff, it might be where he goes, hold on a minute, I want to check something. And he'll like scroll through and he'll be like, oh yeah, this is what I was looking for. And then he'll be like, okay, we're ready to go. And then you hear everything that happens after that point. Today, something similar happened, but Nathan is going through the scroll, and I wrote this down. It was the best comment ever. He goes, and he gets excited about it. And he goes, "Oh gosh, that was weird. Oh man, that was a weird one." It's like, so with all of the experiences that this guy has, when he says, "Oh gosh, that was a weird one," it may be worth noting.
It was definitely a weird one.
It may be worth sharing and talking about. But really, this is more than story time. I think it's interesting to a lot of people. Earlier today, I was with my mother-in-law who said, "Hey, listen," and shout out to Lou Ann. We love you, Nans. But earlier today, she goes, "Hey, listen, I've been listening to the last few episodes. Really enjoyed it. It's kind of weird."
It makes me feel kind of funny.
Well, we talk through it because she hasn't had those experiences. So to me, that really is the benefit of hearing this. For those who've had the experiences, it's the moment of, hey, maybe I'm not crazy.
Right.
And for those who haven't had the experience, it's, wow, there's more out there. There's more to this. There's more for me. Maybe I now desire to have that experience. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we talked about was, and Nans, I'm letting the cat out of the bag here, was she asked me a question. She said, do you think that he has all these experiences because of something that you had said last episode, which was essentially, hey, listen, if we're not talking about God, I'm pretty much bored.
Yeah.
And every conversation really kind of needs to lead to that, or after a while, I'm just not interested. Right. And my response to her was, I think that feeling is more of a response to having the experiences as opposed to the precursor to those experiences. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
So for those of you out there, you too can have these experiences. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to tell you to have them. All right, I've only had a few myself, my Post-it note full, but they are real. Mm-hmm. And even if you haven't yet had one, just to hear that that's out there and to hear how they impact you, the fact that they genuinely do make your heart burn even more for the Lord, I think is really motivating. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had one of these encounters or experiences where I didn't burn more for him, or my faith wasn't increased, or my hunger or whatever, like everything. I mean, I don't think I've ever had one of these experiences or dreams where I didn't go, oh my gosh, like I was in love with Jesus even more, or whatever. I mean, I don't know that I ever have. So yeah, I think that in itself, to me, speaks to where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure the enemy wants me more sold out to Jesus or something.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a great confirmation.
Yeah.
For sure. Mm-hmm. So I think in the story time with Nathan,
we need to have a jingle of some kind. I can do anything.
Reading Rainbow.
Nathan's story. Okay.
LeVar Burton's going to come out.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So
I prefer him to come out as with the blind guy with the visor from Star Trek.
Yeah. So listen, it's time. It's time, Nathan, for probably my favorite story that you've at least shared with me from the scroll.
Yes.
So, and it's my favorite for a few reasons. And once after you tell the story, I will tell you my favorite part of that story.
Okay.
But I do think that it's different than any of the other things we've talked about, and might open up a whole new discussion from there. So with that, please, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Take it away.
So Keith just recently told me that this was his favorite. I didn't realize that.
Absolutely.
Although I've only told him, maybe I've told him 8 or 10 or something.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so there could be another one that will be more your favorite.
So far,
this is the best. This is his favorite. But I do want to say, like, people sometimes if we're gonna, we've been trying to kind of categorize, like mental picture, stronger mental picture / vision, open vision, translocation,
trance.
trance. Yeah, so we've gotten a number of these things like I was there.
I was there.
we just talked about I was there. I honestly don't know where this one falls, and so I got a scripture for it. Ready?
Okay.
This is my proof text, and it would be Psalm 135:6, and it says this: "The Lord does what He pleases." Okay, so that's my that's my proof text. Is the Lord does what He pleases? That's Psalm 135 verse 6, and this is one of those things like I don't know where to put this. But the Lord does what He pleases. And when you look at the word, you have all these people having all these different encounters and different experiences. And they're just outside the box. I think some people are like, well, where's that in the Bible? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's Psalm 135:6.
That's it.
Is where it is. But beyond that, it's not like, if we limit God to exactly these experiences, I think that's a really silly thing to do, because it's not like people sometimes think that the Bible was written and then they had experiences. Like that isn't what happened. What happened was people had experiences with God and then wrote it down. So that is what occurred. It wasn't like a whole Bible was written, and then someone finally did something in the Bible. Like, no, they had the experiences and wrote them down. So we have a lot of experiences that are way outside the box, that are just really strange. And it kind of opens it up for, you know what? God can do whatever He wants to do. And we have really interesting encounters. Sometimes you're asking for them. Sometimes you're not asking for them. Sometimes it's out of nowhere. Sometimes it comes at the end of a lot of prayer. Sometimes you haven't prayed at all. I mean, it's just, I don't know that there's a rhyme or reason for a lot of this stuff. But we'll get into Keith's favorite story.
Yes.
So this is a very, very visceral encounter. It's actually something I still carry. I can still feel it. So every time I talk about it, I can re-feel it. So in fact, if I just like stop and focus, I can still feel it. So it's still there. I can still feel it almost like a film over my eyes and a film over my heart. So it's that strong. Even now, I still can feel it. I can sense it, and I know it's there. And so if you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, I'm sorry to bring up this name for those of you who may offend you given recent events, but I'm just going to tell you the truth because I'm not going to leave people's names out because maybe they're soiled now. And that name is Mike Bickle. So the reason I'm stating his name is because he does have something to do with this encounter. So I hope that doesn't nullify the encounter for you or somehow make the encounter null and void because of his involvement in it. I'm not going to comment on anything that's going on with Mike Bickle. That's not something I really want to touch. There's people dealing with it, and I'll lift it up in prayer and believe in the wisdom and guidance that the people who are called to deal with it can deal with it. But I'm just letting you know that his name will be used. So if that is, just telling you what happened, I'm not going to be weird about it. So, so what happens is I take a group of youth to IHOP, which I'd done numerous times. So by this point now, I hated IHOP for a long, that'll be a whole nother story, I think, where hated IHOP, had a weird principality encounter, long story. Anyway, I finally
hold
started.
on, before you continue, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
A lot of people might not know what IHOP is, and it's not the International House of Pancakes.
No, that would be the International House of Prayer, and that was started by Mike Bickle, and it went 24/7 in 1999.
Okay.
And that means they literally have been doing night and day prayer, and that's a literal night and day. So they have never ceased doing prayer and worship, even when the power went out, because I was actually there once when the power went out and they just went acoustic. So they have literally not stopped prayer and worship in a prayer room for 25 years. Yeah, like 24 hours a day, night and day, every day. So I think they have 24 teams, maybe. I don't know how many teams, probably way more than that. I don't know how many teams they have, but they rotate, obviously, the teams in. And you can watch them change in and out, like literally the person will be playing on the keyboard and the other person just, as their hand lifts up, they come right down. So it's a literal nonstop. Wow. And it's all born out of like all these prophetic encounters that a guy named Bob Jones had, and then Mike Bickle started having them, and Mike Bickle had his own church for a while, and then he eventually left that church to kind of start IHOP. So an IHOP being the house of prayer. So anyway, I hated them for a long time. It's a long story why I hated them. That's for another episode. But I eventually stopped hating them and ended up going there, basically under the unction of the Lord. Like I knew it was the Lord. And this is maybe, I want to say this is like the third or fourth time maybe that I went there. I can't remember. And I would take, I don't know, anywhere from 20 to 60 kids or whatever out to IHOP. And we'd spend, like the week there where they'd have conferences for youth. So it'd be like a youth conference. I think they call it the Fascinate conference, and it was just for high schools, like a high school youth conference. So I'd take the kids out there. It wasn't about me. It was about them. So I would just take them out there. We'd enter in. Kids would have a great time. We'd worship. We'd seek the Lord. We'd spend a good time together. It was a good time. And it was really kind of the best conference that I'd ever been to. That's saying a heck of a lot because we're talking 20 plus years of youth ministry experience where I would take the kids to 4, 5, 6 times a year, I would take them to different conferences, whether it was Acquire the Fire or Dare to Share, which you may be familiar with some of these. There were nationwide conferences for young people. No matter what it was, I pretty much took them to, whether it was like the Young Guys Promise Keepers, everything. And it was just they just had the best ones. IHOP really did. They had like the most fire, the most worship, like the messages were just, good and powerful, and the kids were impacted. So anyway, I took them there. And this one day, I am totally, again, I'm there for the kids. I'm just praying, seeking the Lord, like always. It's in the middle of a service, and I hear the voice of the Lord. And it's very, very strong. And it's not audible, but it's strong. And most of us know, maybe we talked about having an episode on how, you're hearing God or how to hear God or whatever. But anyway, I hear his voice. It's so strong. And it says, listen to IHOP prophetic history. You're in it. I hear it so clearly. And again, not audible. I just hear it, and it's very strong. It's like an imprint on my spirit, and it kind of comes again. It says, "Listen to IHOP's prophetic history. You're in it." And I hear it again, and so I'm kind of like, okay, I don't even know what prophetic history is. Like, I literally have never even heard the term. So again, we'd been there like 4 or 5 times, but it was just for the youth conference, just for the high school youth conference, and I don't ever remember anybody saying anything because Mike Bickle never even spoke at the youth conference, almost ever. At least when we were there. I remember he would speak like maybe one night on like a Saturday night of all the sessions. And a lot of times we wouldn't even go because the kids were like, yeah, he's old and we're bored. Let's go to Waterworld or their equivalent of Waterworld. Anyways, no offense, Mike Bickle, not that you're listening to this. Anyways, so I think we maybe heard Mike Bickle one time, and it was just different speakers, throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And no one ever mentioned anything prophetic history. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase up to that point, at least not that I could remember. And I was like, prophetic history. I remember thinking it was confusing to me because I was like, what's a prophetic history? Like, isn't it prophetic about like future? So I was like, isn't that kind of a contradiction in terms, like prophetic history? I thought that just sounded strange. So I was kind of like, well, okay, I kind of tucked it away in my brain. I thought, well, I don't have time to look into this now, but because it's, I'm trying to keep track of 60 kids, at the conference. So I'll deal with it when I get back. So, but it's definitely there. It's kind of like burning on me. So on the way home, one of the kids is sitting next to me in the van, and we were driving a bunch of vans, transporting all these kids. And I go, hey, can you Google like IHOP just to see if it's a thing? And he's like, oh, yeah. And he Googles it, and he's like, yeah, it's like right here. And I'm like, okay, so I know it's a real deal. So I get home, I Google it. I realize it is like 14 hours of teaching. And I'm like, holy cow. I think it was like the 2009 version or something that came up on YouTube. And I remember being like, oh man, seriously, Lord? And I just felt like the Lord say it again, like, listen, I'm like, I have to listen to 14 hours of teaching? Like,
give me the Cliff Notes.
Like, version. Yeah, where's the short version of this? Where's the 45-minute? Like, I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But I just felt like, okay, Lord, So what I did was, because I'm obsessive and crazy, I will, when I know God's telling me to do something, whether I want to do it or not, I will go gangbusters. So I got earbuds, put them in. I had my phone. I would just play IHOP prophetic history all the time. So no matter what I was doing, like I would just be praying, I would be cleaning the house, making dinner, whatever it was, I would be listening to IHOP prophetic history. My poor wife's like, yeah, I had to listen to Mike Bickle every night before because I put my phone on and I go to sleep listening to Mike Bickle because I'm like, I'm thinking I'm in there. The Lord said I'm in there. So I'm listening for my name. So I'm literally, the first time I listened to it, I didn't listen to anything they said or that he said. I just listened for my name. So I don't hear my name, and I'm really disappointed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to listen to it again, all 14 hours, and I'm really going to pay attention for my name this time, but I'm also going to listen to what they're saying, right? So this is now my second time through. So I'm listening to it, and it's late at night. I'm probably the 6th hour or 7th hour in or something, and he starts talking about this thing called the spirit of travail, or at least that's what he called it. He called it like the spirit of travail. Well, I never heard of such a thing. I was like, what is a spirit of travail? Like, what are you talking about? And he talks about a guy named David Brainerd, who was a contemporary of Jonathan Edwards. Now, if you don't know who Jonathan Edwards was, Jonathan Edwards led a massive revival, or at least he was one of the leaders of a massive revival called the First Great Awakening. And it was in America. It was 1730s and 40s, around there. And God just moved in a major way, and a cajillion people got saved, and there was a lot of power and stuff. Jonathan Edwards was one of the main leaders of that. And in fact, I think Benjamin Franklin, I think, mentioned, and he said Jonathan Edwards was the greatest mind in American history or something like that. So even people that you would know of that are very famous knew who Jonathan Edwards was. Anyway, he had a contemporary, a young guy. He was in his 20s. His name was David Brainerd. And he burned for the Native Americans. Like, he wanted to get the gospel to the Native Americans. And he would get so filled. I remember some of the accounts. He was so filled and so on fire that he would go out into the snow, and the snow would melt all around him as he would just pray and intercede for the Native Americans. So he would talk about David Brainerd in his, because he has like a biography. It's not meant to be a biography. It's actually his journal. So you can read this online. At least you used to be able to read it online. It's incredibly boring because it's meant to be just his like journal before the Lord. So it's a rough read. But anyway, in it, he talks about like, I would get the way he put it, he said, I would get a spirit of travail for the heathen, is how he called them. For the heathen, and I would go out and I would pray under this spirit of travail. And he said, I would weep and the fire of God would be on me while I was praying, and the snow would melt and blah, blah, blah. And then he said, then I would go out and he would preach to the Native Americans through a drunken interpreter. So the guy was not a believer. He's completely drunk, and he would go out there and he would preach through the drunken non-believer, and the natives would fall down, give their lives to Christ, and be on fire. And Jonathan Edwards says there were no people more, how do you put it? Jonathan Edwards said, I found no greater converts than those who converted under the preaching of David Brainerd.
Wow. Like
no backsliding. I mean, this is kind of power. But David Brainerd said if he didn't have the spirit of travail in prayer before he went out, that it just wasn't as powerful, basically. So I'm hearing all this. Mike Bickle's talking about this, right, in the prophetic history. This is the 6 hours in or whatever it was. And I'm sitting there listening to this, like, well, it's kind of interesting. Because I didn't pay attention at all before. I'm just like, where's my name? And nobody said my name, and I was really ticked off about it. But anyway, so I'm sitting there like, okay, listen, this is an interesting story. That's kind of cool. And then Mike Bickle starts saying, so this is what Mike Bickle says, when I saw that or read about that, I said, hey, that's something I want. This is Mike Bickle says this. Mm-hmm. And at this time, he's in St. Louis. So he talks about, hey, I'm pastoring in St. Louis. I'm reading about David Brainerd, and I'm reading about this whole spirit of travail and this prayer and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and so he's in a prayer meeting, and he said, bam, it hits him, the spirit of travail, or what he calls, and David Brainerd called the spirit of travail. And he said he just wept for like 2 hours or an hour or whatever it was, under the power of God for the lost. He said it was super powerful. It was amazing. He just prayed for an hour or two or whatever under the power of God. And then he said what happened then was, this was like Saturday night. Then he said Sunday morning he goes to his St. Louis congregation, and he said he began to preach the word. And he said as he began to preach, the power of God hit the room. And he said like 40 or 50 people came to Christ. And it was powerful. He said as he was preaching, people are weeping all over the congregation. And he said usually like 2 or 3 people would come and give their lives to Christ, but he's like 40 or 50 people came. So he said it happened twice when he was in St. Louis. That is what happened. Like the spirit of travail comes on him. So anyway, so he talks about this, and it's getting late, and he kind of, I'm like, okay, that's cool. So I turn off my phone, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that'd be cool, Lord. I've always had a heart for the lost. It's why I entered youth ministry, honestly. Like, it's because I wanted to win young people to Jesus. I wanted a young generation to know the Father's love. I wanted to know they were loved. I wanted them to know the simple gospel. I wanted them to know what the kingdom of God was, and I wanted them to be on fire and set free and bring the kingdom to earth for the rest of their lives. And that was my heart, just burned all the time. So I thought, man, I want that. Like, I want the spiritual veil. Like, that'd be cool. Because not because I cared about crying and stuff, but because I was like, apparently this is how you get power to win the lost. I mean, because that's what he was saying, Yeah. Now, I didn't fully believe that. Like, I really didn't. I was kind of skeptical. Like, even listening to it, I was kind of like, really? Like, you have to like burn, and you have to cry, and you burn snow, and then you can like win people? Like, I didn't really fully buy it, but I thought, well, what the heck do I got to lose? Like, and so I was getting tired, and it honestly was kind of a flippant prayer, right? I just, right before I went to sleep, I kind of threw up this very brief flippant prayer, and it was this: that'd be cool. that was my prayer. I was like, Lord, that'd be kind of cool. And then I completely forgot about it, right? So I go to sleep. Next day, church, right? So because Sunday morning, I go to church, and honestly, I talk about it like this. I'll be very frank with you. I'll still be Nathan, but I'll be very frank. Sorry.
Surely, Jess.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. I was one of those mornings where I wasn't feeling particularly holy. I didn't sleep very well that night. The Bronco game was on. It was a very important Bronco game. I think it was determining playoff position or something. And so I remember being like, and it was an 11 o'clock game, right? So it was like right in the middle of service. So I remember going down to worship. I was tired. Somebody annoyed me in the foyer before I went in. I am not feeling the love of God. I'm not feeling connected, right? And I go down to worship, and I just want to go home because I want to watch the Bronco game. So I go down to the front, and I'm kind of sitting there, and I'm like, I'm a disciplined man of the Lord, and I will worship my God. I mean, it was one of those mornings. Like, it wasn't like overflow. It was like obedience. You know what I'm saying? So I had an obedient worship, sacrifices,
Discipline.
yeah, discipline and obedience and sacrifice praise. Like, it was a way sacrifice and praise this particular day. So I go down there. I was like, I'm worshiping. Well, my buddy Codeman, shout out to Codeman Von Baird, who I'm going to see in a few days. So, yay, Codeman. He comes down, and I am in that disciplined worship mode. And he comes behind me, and he knows I've had back pain, especially at that time I'd had for years and years and years. And he always was the one to kind of remember that I always had it, because I would never really say anything about it. But he would always remember. And he'd say, hey, you still having back pain? I'm like, hey, I just want to pray for you, for your healing. And I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. So he goes and starts praying. Now, this is where the world becomes very weird. So he lays his hand on my back, and the next thing I know, I feel the power of God. It feels like, how I would describe it is maybe like a cylinder, maybe a foot around me, opened up over my head, and water, like rushing water, like from heaven, as I felt, is pouring down on the top of my head so violently that I can barely breathe, and it's shoving me to my knees. So I'm like, oh, like I literally feel it. I don't feel wet, but I feel like pressure and like power, and I'm like, oh. So I kind of bend forward. So I kind of kneel down. And I'm in like kneeling position, and now I'm bawling my eyes out. I mean, I am like weeping, and I ended up falling over, or kind of laying over on my side in the fetal position, and I am bawling. I mean, I am weeping like I've never wept in my entire life. And all I'm saying is, and I begin to pray, and I'm praying, God, save the lost. Give me the lost, God. Save those who don't know you, Jesus. Like, this is what I'm praying. At the time, I'm not even registering that this is the whatever spirit of travail or whatever, whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm not registering that is what's happening. All I know is I am praying for the lost, and it isn't me. It's like Holy Spirit praying through me. I mean, it is so powerful, and I can feel this water like this pouring down on me, and it is so stinking powerful. And I remember just seeing there, and people, it was funny because people are coming over and laying hands on me and being like, Lord, just touch him in his hour of need, And I'm like, I'm not needy. They're like, Lord, just heal his heart. I'm like, I'm not hurting right now. Like, this isn't about me. Like, people were praying something that was so far off,
Not needy. That's the greatest.
I mean, I wasn't. People are praying stuff that's just so radically far off of where I actually was. I mean, bless their heart.
Yeah, bless them.
Bless their heart. Like, their heart, they really were. They were just trying to help, but they were so far off. I was like, just stop praying for me. Like, this is not even what's going on at all. I'm crying out for the lost, and it's like intense, and I'm like, Lord Jesus, and I'm like going for it. So anyway, I don't know how many minutes into it, I don't know how long it went. Maybe it's like a half an hour. I'm bawling my eyes out, and I start to think in my head, I've got to give this away. Like, I'm going to touch people. Bam, they're going to have spirit of travail or whatever this is, and they're going to bawl their eyes out for the lost, just like I'm doing. And I have this thought. So I'm like, I'm going to go pray. And I'm just constantly weeping. Like, I never stopped for a second. And I kept, in the lost were just over and over again in my heart. And I'm praying it. And I go, okay, I'm going to do it. And right then, Holy Spirit, I hear his voice so strongly. And he goes, no, you can't. And I was like, what? And the Holy Spirit goes, you can't give this away. This is just for you. Like, that's what I heard. And so I was kind of like, okay, that was dumb voice. So I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm still going to try. Like, actually, I was just so stupid. But I remember, like, I was like, I'm still going to try and give this away. So I start crawling around, which I can barely move. I mean, I am under the power of God. It is so intense. I'm like crawling around. And by the way, this whole thing was filmed. So if you go back on New Song Church and Ministries website, far enough, it would have to go way back. I want to say 2017 or something like that. You can see me actually crawling around. So I crawl up onto the stage and I'm touching people's feet on stage, like the drummer and the keyboardist and, you know, like the singers. I'm literally just crawling up, they're going to get it, Lord. I'm going to touch them in the spiritual veil. And of course, nothing. No, they're not getting anything because the Lord told me it wasn't going to happen in the first place. But I was just like, okay, I'm into it. So I crawl around touching. I'm still bawling. I mean, the entire time I'm weeping. So finally, I just give up. I'm like, okay, I believe you, Lord. Like, they're obviously not going to get this. This is just for me. I'll just flop over on my back and ride this thing out. You know, it's basically what I said. Like, I don't know how long this is going to go. At this point, it's been like an hour and a half of me crying nonstop and saying, Lord, save the lost, nonstop. Right. I mean, it did not stop for 1 second. It was just constant. So I finally crawl up. I fall over on my back with the intention of just seeing how long this is going to go on. It's just kind of like, well, I'm just going to keep bawling and praying until the Lord is off me. I'm not that I wanted him to leave because it actually felt really awesome, even though it was like physically exhausting. So I flip over on my back, and right when I hit my back, my body shoots, or my spirit shoots out of my body. Like I go whoosh, and all of a sudden I'm like floating about 10 or 15 feet above my body. Because I remember looking down at my body and going like, because my first thought was, man, I look like crap. Like that was my actual thought. I looked down, I was like, oh man, like snot, my eyes are red and puffy. Like I was like, dude, you look bad. You know? And right as I know it's such a silly thing that you would think, but that's what I was thinking. Right as I was having that thought, I go, like something just pushes me backwards, and I'm going backwards up. And I go through the roof. Now, the church we're in was tall roof, like it was probably a 30 or 40 foot roof or something. And I just go whoosh, like right through the roof, and I'm going backwards. So like the clouds are flying past my head as I go through the roof, and I look at New Song, the building, the church itself, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as I'm going backwards, like. At one point, I turn in the air. So I turn very quickly. So I'm going backwards for what it seemed like a long time. And now New Song is like really, really small. And the cars look like I can barely see them. And I turn in midair and I go, whoo. And I realize like I stopped and I'm standing now. And I'm standing on the edge of like a green grass. It was like a green grass and just fell off the edge. So I'm standing, if you can imagine, with half my foot on the grassy knoll where the second gunman was that killed JFK. I'm standing on the grassy knoll with half my foot on, and I look over.
Flat Earth.
Yeah, I know, right? So I look over my shoulder, and I could still see New Song like way down there. But I'm kind of just standing precariously, like almost like balancing. But I wasn't balancing myself. It was like I felt like this force balancing me. Mm-hmm. So I just stand there. So I'm looking now in front of me. And what I see is like, this is the only way I can tell people. If you've ever seen the Beauty and the Beast cartoon, not the movie, but the Beauty and the Beast cartoon from like a million years ago, and she first comes out and it's like, ma, 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 ma. You know what I'm talking about? It's like the very beginning of the movie. Madame Gaston or whatever, I don't know. So anyways, this is like the scene that I see is this
like Charlie Brown's teacher just sang the song of.
Oh, I totally did, like,
yeah.
Anyway, so I'm always sitting there staring at this French village. I mean, not necessarily French, but it was like Middle Ages or whatever village. But it is like insanely. I have to almost close my eyes to see it properly. It's like it's insanely bright and insanely vivid. It's like the colors are. It's hard to describe. It's like a billion colors, like way more colors than I've ever seen here.
Wow.
Like, and it is like everything is really, really vibrant and a quadrillion colors all over the place. And I was just like, whoa, but it still looks like a town, like a Middle Ages town. And people are doing stuff and they're singing just like in the Beauty and the Beast. Not that song, but they're singing like different songs.
There's joy.
Joy. Yeah, that's how I would describe it. Like total joy, total serenity. Everyone is very happy, having a great time doing, but they're all working. You know, they were like, one guy was carrying like a bale of hay. I remember like kids playing, and people just sort of doing life, I guess. And at one point, and I could smell bread, like somebody baking bread. So it smelled like really, really good. And right at that moment, a guy walked kind of diagonally in front of me, and he's holding a basket full of bread. It was freshly baked. I could smell it. And he stops and he looks over at me and he goes, "Oh, you're here." And he just keeps walking, you know, which I don't really know in the moment how to feel about that. I was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. My thought was like, yeah, I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing here. I feel really awkward. Like it felt really, I'm still halfway hanging off the edge of the earth or whatever the heck I'm doing. And he just walks along. And so I'm just kind of standing there, like still taking in this scene. I don't know, maybe it was 30 seconds later or something. And I'm looking out and all of a sudden I see this white mist. And the white mist is whoa, the white mist is, hitting the microphone. The white mist is like walking. So I see this, it looks like white mist walking is all I can say. I can actually see footprints of this like white misty cloud.
Similar to what we talked about with the I Was There last episode.
Yeah, exactly how you described the I Was There with like this like foggy cloud. Mm-hmm. That's how it was, like a foggy cloud coming at me, but almost like had feet and it was walking. And as it was getting closer, this cloud, I noticed that this was a person. And this person had feet like sandals, like you would think if when people say, "Oh, Jesus wears sandals and a white robe," like that's what it looked like. Yeah. So it was like white robe down to his ankles, and I could see the sandals in the feet, and they were like burnished bronze, like in terms of like they were look like dark, tanned, that kind of color. And he's walking, and I could see again kind of with the mist, he's walking, and as he gets closer to me, I'm like, it's getting scary, and it's getting scary because I can feel. I would even say power isn't the right word. I could feel holiness, awe, like pure, like light. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, like kind of like, what do I do? Like, I don't know how to describe it, but that's like almost like panic. Yeah. Like I don't know what to do, you know, like there's this holy thing approaching me and I'm like, oh, what do I do? You know, do you bow? Do you jump off the edge of the earth? Like, what do you do? So anyway, he comes closer to me and now I'm looking down and I'm sort of bowing down almost. And I can't look up. It's like the purity of this person is so strong. I can't look up like to see where his face would be, which I don't think I'd see it anyways because it was like a cloud, but I couldn't look up. So I could see the feet. And so all I could do is stare at his feet. And I could barely even move my head. And basically then he starts talking to me and he addresses me by my name, which actually gave me a lot of comfort because I remember in the experience being like, oh, he knows my name. Like I'm not a stranger. He's not mad at me. Yeah. You know, because I was kind of afraid he was going to be mad at me. I don't know why. I just had that fear. But I remember when he said Nathan, and I was like, oh, thank God. Like it was just really kind of, I felt peaceful. And he said, I have something I want to show you. And so I knew I was supposed to look up because where his arm was, I knew he was going to show me something, but I couldn't move my head because this power and glory or whatever you want to call it, I could not get my head up. I was like, trying to get my head up. I finally was able to move my head enough to kind of look where his arm was, and I could see the white mist kind of moving. And so I could tell he was moving something toward me, and he moves it, and now I don't see his hand or anything, but I see a baby. It's a little baby, like wrapped in swaddling clothes, I guess, like he's wrapped in a white cloth. And it's like the most perfect, beautiful baby I'd ever seen in my life. Blonde hair, blue eyes, just a beautiful looking baby. And he looks at me and he goes, "This is Jeremy Horn." And then he pulls it back. And then I feel the same thing going on the other side, his other arm. And he moves his arm forward and I can see another baby. And this baby has black hair, darker eyes, and but just as beautiful, just totally different looking, but really, really beautiful. And he looks at me and he goes, "This is Michael Mon." And I was like, and he pulls it back. And then I hear this, just a brief pause, and he looks at me and he says, "Now you can see, go teach them how." And I go backwards, and then I flip, you know, so I'm kind of falling. backwards. And I'm going backwards. So I'm looking over my shoulder and I could see the church getting closer and closer and closer to me. And I'm like, I just thought like, I'm going to hit the church. Like I'm going to hit the top of the building, like it's going to hurt. But I go right through the building, smack into my body. And I'm like, and I wake up or whatever. I was always awake. So I never went, I was awake the whole time. So I kind of come to in my body and I realize there's two people praying for me. One is Jeremy Horn and one is Michael Mon. Now these two young guys probably were two of the hardest kids that I had. They were not, I don't know. They had issues. I guess just put it that way. Good kids, but you know what I mean? They weren't the kind of kids that you would be like, hey, this is represents our youth ministry, but they're praying for me. They're both on either arm. And as I open my eyes and I look at them, they look just like the babies, like they did as babies. And I remember they tell this story sometimes better than I do because they remember everything I said, which I don't remember everything I said, but they start laughing whenever they were in the room when I would tell this story because they were like, yeah, you were telling us how beautiful we are. And but all I could see was how beautiful they were and how perfect they were and how awesome they were. And I was just like, wow, like they're so beautiful and perfect. And then but I just saw them as literal babies. And then their faces began to kind of fade. And then I just saw them as like they normally were. But so then I'm still under the spirit of travail. Like I had not stopped crying the whole time. Like my body was crying the whole time that I was up in this encounter or whatever it was. And I was still crying. So I stayed on the stage crying after they got done praying for me. Till service is over. So it's 2 hours later. It's over 2 hours. We always did an hour worship, an hour sermon, whatever. So it's like 2 hours later. People are leaving. And my wife is like, hubby, they're getting me off the ground. I can barely walk. I am utterly exhausted. And they're trying to help me down. And they're kind of like, what is going on? Like, what happened to you? My wife's asking me, what happened to you? Like, what is going on? And I'm trying to tell her, and I can't. All I can tell her is like, everybody's beautiful. Everybody's perfect. You don't know how to see, basically. So I get in the car. I'm good. She actually, remember, my wife's like, do you want me to drive home? Because can you even drive? I was like, yeah, I think I can drive. And as we're driving back, I start talking to her. And I realize like what had happened, at least to a certain degree, because I can feel it in me. And the Lord is like speaking to me about, we have to see people, what they look like under the blood of Jesus. Like all lost people must be seen how Jesus sees them through the blood. Because that way we're going to call out the gold in them. We're going to call out the greatness in them by seeing who they are in Christ. We're going to physically call it out and we're going to prophetically call it out. So we're going to say, this is who you are. This is what you're called to. And they're going to feel it and they're going to know it. And it's actually going to prophesy their future and their current reality. And it's going to bring it right out of them. But in order to do that, a prophetic company has to arise that can actually see the truth about who people are. And you're not going to see what they're doing now. You're not going to see who they are. You're going to see how they are under the blood of Jesus, how they are in their perfection. And that's how you're going to treat them. And that's how you're going to call them. And that's how you're going to talk to them. And that's how you're going to interact with them. And when you do that, a harvest of young people in particular are going to come to Christ.
Their identity.
Yes.
Their real identity.
100%. You're going to call out their identity. So this isn't the end of this encounter, right? So I am feeling, as you can imagine, very funky. Like the whole rest of the day. I mean, I feel funky. Like I don't really know what to do. I feel so, because I was just somewhere else and I'm still halfway there. Like I feel like I am. Mm-hmm. And so I just feel weird, like really weird. But eventually I'm able to go to sleep that night because I'm exhausted. Now I have to wake up the next day to take my kids to school, like early, because they had a Monday school. So I was like thinking I really need to get to sleep. So I finally go to sleep and I am awakened at like 3:00 in the morning, wide awake. Like somebody just kicked me awake and I awake interceding. So I literally wake up in full on intercession in prayer. Like I wake up like, and I'm like, whoa, I've never had that experience ever before or since, where I actually woke up in absolute intercessory prayer out
consciously.
Loud. Consciously.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you knew what you were praying for when you woke up.
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
I was like, whoa, like, oh my gosh. But it was so funny because I was still annoyed. I was annoyed because I was tired and I was like, Lord, I need to go to sleep because I got to wake up early to take my kids to school, But I got over my annoyance and I just went downstairs and I'm like, I literally sat at my kitchen table, and I sat there and I said this out loud. I go, Lord, what? Like, what is it that you want to tell me? You know, and I actually said it out loud with even a little bit of like irreverent anger. You know, I go, what? Like, what is it that you want to tell me? And I'm telling you, instantly the whole kitchen like shook. Like, you ever seen those movies where reality changes for a second, like Matrix, like with the
kind of wobbles.
Yeah, kind of wobbles.
Yeah.
Like when the cat walked by, it was like, woo.
Yeah.
And
I
don't
vibrate.
Yes, that actually happens. I can actually see that. The whole kitchen goes, woo. Now, I don't see anything other than that. So I don't like hear anything or see anything other than I did see the like warble. But I feel a presence. I absolutely know there is an angel in my kitchen and just to the right of me. I don't see him.
Wow.
Don't see him at all. I don't see him. I don't hear him, but I feel him. I'm like in that warble, and I know he's there. And I'm like, whoa. And it is a powerful powerful angel. I could feel it. And I was like, whoa, this is powerful. And I remember I didn't hear anything. Of course, I couldn't see anything. But what I felt coming from him was this phrase, tell me what you want, and I'll bring it before the throne of God. That's the phrase. I just feel it. I know it. So, of course, I'm sitting there. What have I just been praying about for the last 16 hours? You know, the lost, right? I've been crying out for the lost. He said, tell me what you want, and I will bring it before the throne room of God. And so I literally turned to answer him from where, and looked where I thought I felt him.
Yeah.
And I said, I want the lost. It warbles again. The room goes, and he's gone. And I'm like, I guess that's the end of that. And I went back to sleep, lived a normal day, except for my buddy, I don't know how you put this, my wife's stepbrother, whose name is Jake, called me. Shout out to Jake Campbell down in Florida. He calls me. At the time he was coming to New Song. He lived down south. And he calls me. He goes, look, Nate, I had to call you, man. He goes, I got to tell you, I had a vision with you yesterday. I was like, really? He was at church, right? So he saw everything. He goes, yeah. He goes, I just had to tell you, like when you were up front and you kind of crumpled over, he said, I saw 4 angels holding each other's hands, making a circle around you, and water was coming down from heaven and just hitting you, but it wasn't hitting anyone else but you. Like the angels were holding the water in, holding their hands. So he's like, I just wanted to share that with you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because that just backed up exactly what I had experienced, you know, and I hadn't talked to him at all. You know, he just saw from afar, and he's like, I saw that come on you and hit you. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that is Keith's favorite story. And I don't know if it lines up. So when I say I still feel it now, I feel it. When I get around people, all I want to do is call out who they are. All I want to do is tell them who they are in Christ. All I want to do is prophesy their future to them in a way that unlocks their potential and their identity. And it's like, I want to teach it. I think it's why we're passionate, and I'm passionate about Basileia, because a huge chunk of it is going to be deprogramming and debunking religious lies that have kept people in prison and kept them from being who they are in Jesus. So I feel like one of the mandates on my life is I know it's one of the mandates on my life because I had this psychotic encounter that said, now you can see, you've got to show others how to do this. So here we are. Yeah.
I feel similar for different reasons, a part of which was the I was there last week, or last episode when we talked about it. But so there are a few things. First of all, I have a favorite part of that story.
Okay.
But there's also a part that kind of makes me almost shake my head with envy or jealousy or something. It's the fact that, and I'll start with that. It's the fact that here you are, you're totally disconnected, and it happens.
Oh, right, yeah. And yeah, it was not like this spiritual moment or something.
Even in the listening through the prophetic history, there was somewhat of a disconnect, and at best, It was, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'd kind of like that.
Yeah.
Which that's the part that I'm like, there's so many things I want to experience that I just wish I could say, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then experience it, you know?
I think
Like,
the
how does
funniest
that work?
I think the funniest thing is it wasn't like this was the result of 6 weeks of prayer and fasting and consecrating myself to the Lord. Like none of that was the case at all. In fact, I would say it was probably quite the opposite. I mean, other than the fact that I was listening to the IHOP prophetic history pretty religiously, other than that, it certainly wasn't that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, what really strikes me is that it wasn't the result of, like you just said, a long term, I'm seeking it, I've got to jump through these 15 hoops that I feel that are, you know, mark the right religious boxes.
Right.
But it was absolutely genuine.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, and what I take from that every time is because it was genuine. Mm-hmm. As flippant as it may have seemed or might have sounded to those listening, it was absolutely from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
When you said, that'd be cool, you meant it.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely meant it. I mean, I wanted the spirit of travail, if for no other reason than to see the lost saved.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
And that's why it's one of my favorite parts, although I am somewhat envious of the fact that I have yet been able to say, it'd be cool. And then, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not, that is not normal. I just want everyone to know. I don't go to bed at night and go, it'd be cool to get $1 million. And I get $1 million. I mean, that isn't like normal for me.
Although, Lord, it would be cool.
It would be cool.
Thank you, Jesus.
Although I think there's some truth there. I mean, there's something about that, though. Yeah. That I really think is important, that maybe we shouldn't gloss over too much, in the sense that, like, I think it is important that we realize that, you know, it isn't all about these pious, you know, super serious, reverent, you know, months of fasting and prayer that produces results. That sometimes it's just saying yes to the Lord in whatever way you say yes to the Lord in the moment you feel an unction to say yes to the Lord, you know, whatever that might be, whatever that yes might look like. Because I think sometimes we're like, God just needs your yes, you know, and it's always posited, like, oh my God. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's always posited in this way of like, it's got to be deep and anguish and, I mean, like, you know, this like, God, your yes, yeah, or something like that. Which I don't think that's wrong necessarily. I think there's a place for that, but I think we're missing that it could just be like, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. I think there's a place for that, you know. I mean, where someone
obviously
goes, all right.
He was ready. He was not only ready, but he wanted, and he was, I guess, just waiting for you to be ready to go.
Yeah, I think that he was, and it was just being. I think it's just like anything else. Like later on, maybe when we talk about, or even in Basile, maybe we talk about authority.
Yeah,
and we talk about how do we bring heaven to earth. We talk about how to partner with God. And sometimes that partnering with God, I think part of the problem is we think we know how to partner with God and we've got it down to our pray, fast, consecrate formula. Is if we just do these things, somehow God will do that thing. And it honestly totally misses the gospel, I think, sometimes, in the sense that anytime we boil anything down to a formula or this is how you get it, like you'll hear a lot of people say, if you want revival, you know, fill in the blank. And they have their own formula for how they think you're going to get revival. And my point would be this, like as someone who's lived through 2 revivals, one of which started under my own leadership, at least the one that I did, there's no formula. Like there wasn't like pray fast, everyone has to jump through this hoop and you got to pray for 45 days. And the whole church, you know, 80% or whenever they say, well, the whole church has to pray. Well, what does that mean? Like every single person all of the time? Are we talking about 90%, 80%? How, I mean, it's just, you know, I don't know how that even works, but what I found is it gets away from the relationship. And I think even the playfulness of God, like sometimes God is just like, I love you.
Yeah.
So here it comes.
He is gentle.
Oh, he's so gentle and he's so kind. You know, doesn't mean that he always does things nicely because sometimes it can be a bit violent. So I mean, I've had some violent encounters with the Lord. I don't mean beat up, but anyways, we're going to get to those later on. But where God has chastised me, you know, and been like, son, that you're way off. You know, you need to repent right now. But anyway, what I mean is like, I don't want to ever come to that place where we think we know how it is.
Yeah.
And I think this encounter was definitely marked my life in a way that God was like, You just got translated to wherever the heck you were. You just like talked to some major, which could be Holy Spirit, Jesus. I don't even know. So powerful. It's changed my whole life. Like, and you had this out of body, bawled for 2.5 hours for the lost. And all you did was say, that'd be nice. You know what I'm saying? That's all you did. You didn't do anything else. You just said, because in the moment, the unction of the Spirit was that'd be nice.
Yeah.
It's like, couldn't Jesus have healed every leper just by speaking to them?
Yeah. Like he could have.
You'd think he could have, but maybe he couldn't have.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's not what the Father was
Not
doing.
how he wanted to do it.
Apparently, the Father was touching lepers because Jesus would lay his hands on lepers in direct violation of Leviticus. So he could have avoided violating Old Testament sundry laws by just speaking to them. But he didn't do that.
Yeah.
He did specifically what the Bible tells him not to do, which is lay hands on them.
It's the hold my communion juice moment.
Yes, exactly. And he's like laying hands on them. It's like, you don't have to lay hands, but maybe he did. So why didn't he just heal the blind? Why did he hawk loogies all over him? Like, apparently that's what the Father was doing. But do you understand what I'm saying? It's
absolutely.
like, well, now we know how to do it. And it's like, Jesus is like, no, you don't. Because you know what? How you do it is you listen to the Father.
Yeah.
And you do what he tells you. And if he tells you to go get a burger and watch the game, and that's how revival's going to come, then that's what you do. If he tells you to hold a 16-hour prayer meeting, then that's what you do. But this is your relationship with the Lord, and it should all be marked by joy. So, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, as a quick side observation, it is odd to me that whenever we seem to hear, this is going to be somewhat of an overgeneralization, but when we hear bringing revival, it's us bringing revival.
Right.
Here's the 15 things that we're going to do, making it about us. Now let's let's sing It's All About You.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's really interesting,
It's
isn't
all
it?
about us. Now let's sing It's All About You.
It's all about hypocrisy. Sorry.
Oh, man. That was too much.
That was
on
too
the
low.
head.
Did I
That was
punch too
great.
low?
No,
Did I
that
need
was
to-
perfect.
Did the ref
You know.
take a point away?
Bing, bing.
No, you keep
There
the
you
gloves
go.
up a little. I mean, I'm just sick of it.
Yeah.
I'm not sick of it, and I'm not angry. I'm not like, I'm so sick. That isn't not
Well, puts
my...
the focus on the wrong thing.
Yeah, I'm just tired of the focus being on us instead of on him. And even on ways where it sounds holy. You know, because we're like, well, we all have to do this. We all have to fast. We all have to pray. We all have to do our part for God to do his part. It's like, no, you don't. God's going to do his part whether you do your part or not. But now, of course, is there a reality of seeking the Lord, of loving Jesus, of prayer and seeking, you know, of course there is. But at the same time, there's that element of like, he's God and we're not. And he's not going to fit into our box. He's not going to be like, well, okay, I see you have the 14 things done for revival, so here I come.
Yeah.
Like, that just isn't how it works. And I'm speaking from experience here. I mean, I'm literally speaking from when the revival hit our youth group in 2003. There was no formula. You know, no, yes, I'd been praying for it. But I was the only one praying for it, at least that I knew of. Like on a regular basis, I would hold a prayer meeting and I'd be the only one to show up. I mean, this is like, and my assistant, John, shout out to John. This is like, that was it.
It's a meeting of one.
Yes. And I mean, I would pray and I'd cry out and I would go for it. And then I would just believe God. And no one else would even show up. And I did that for like 6 months. And then I stopped doing it because I was tired. And then guess what? God just showed up and he just decided. Now when it faded, I was so like panicky, you know, when it started going away, and it's a long story. I just told Keith a piece of it. When it started going away, when it started fading, there was a lot of reasons for it. We got massively attacked by the enemy, long story. But anyway, after it was kind of all over, of course, when you've been through that, all you want to do is get it back. And so then you start just looking around like, how do I get it back? So I probably read 100 articles, maybe 50 books on revival, on how to get revival, on what you need to do to have God move in your midst. Like, and I did them all. Like, I am telling you, I'm asking forgiveness from every leadership team that I ever led during that time, and from the youth that had to sit through my preaching during that time. I ask you forgiveness because I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was just hungry. I was trying to do the right thing, but every formula I tried just failed miserably. And it would be like, okay, we got to fast. We're going to fast 4 days. We're going to, because this guy says that you have to do a Daniel fast for 21 days. Okay, that's what we got to do. And then we're going to have to this is how we have to do worship. We have to pray like this. this. We're all going to pray every day for hours. I mean, this is what I did through various times, over the years. And it was like, I would swear to you that every time we did it, there was less presence and there was less power in the meetings and it felt more dry. And it was so confusing to me because I was like, I'm doing all the stuff they say I'm supposed to be doing. Like I'm praying every day. I'm praying for 3 hours. Sometimes I was praying 5 and 6 hours, 7 hours a day. I'm fasting. I'm like reading my word every single day for hours. I'm like holding prayer meetings that maybe I'm the only, maybe we'd had 3, 4, 5 people come or whatever, but I'm doing all this stuff right. And it isn't work. Not only is it not working, like the opposite is happening. And so of course, most of the books would be like, don't worry. If the opposite happens, just keep going. So I'm like, okay, I guess it's the old pray until something happens, push anagram, I guess we'll just keep praying until something, and then it would just get worse.
Yeah.
And then over the subsequent years, I would just hear God's voice in such a small, I didn't want to hear God's voice because that's not at all what I meant to say. I didn't mean to say I didn't want to hear God's voice. I didn't want to hear him say anything except for revival's coming.
Yeah.
So if he were to say something other than that, I didn't want to hear it. Yeah. So he would say to me like, son, stop. Like I love you. I understand your heart, but you're going about this all wrong. He would say this to me and I did not want to hear it. I was just like, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear how I get revival. That's all I want to hear. Tell me what I got to do. Tell me I will do anything. If I had to strip naked, run down the street singing Kumbaya backwards, wearing Mardi Gras beads, I will do it if that means we get revival at the end of this. I don't care if I have a felony and I have to register anyway. So I'm not I don't care. Like I want revival. I'll do whatever. That's where I was. I was so obsessed and so focused. I probably hurt a lot of people along the way just because I'm not trying to, but just be like, this is what we got to do now, guys, because this is what we're doing wrong. And this is what we got to do to get God to move. And, I lacked peace and I would just run from thing to thing and from book to book and from conference to conference because when you've experienced it, it's like everything else sucks. Like the normal church service is so stinking boring. It's like, you gotta go back. You're just like, I gotta have that. Yeah. I mean, when you have like 200 kids on fire for Christ and your meetings are 6 hours long, 5 days a week, and kids are getting blasted with the glory of God and miracles are happening and everyone's getting saved, it's like, this is it. Like, why would I ever have church any other way? And then when it goes, you just, all you want is to get it back. And so I went through that long process. I don't know if we're going am I going too much of a tangent?
No, I mean, I think that points back to the real impact of that comment. It was simple. It was genuine.
Yeah.
It was from the heart. And it wasn't about what can I do. It was like, yeah, I'd want that.
Yeah. It was that flippant. And it wasn't flippant, but it kind of was.
It was genuine. It rings of peace.
Oh, yeah. I was just like, I'd like that, Lord. Like, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like that.
How awesome.
That's all it was. And bam, it was 12 hours later. And it was like, whoosh, I get this massive answer to that prayer. And so I don't know what lessons are to be learned from that, but I think the biggest lesson is there are no formulas. Mm-hmm. There really aren't. Even in how people get saved, especially in the West, we've boiled it down to a formula, right? You have to say,
repeat after me.
Yeah, say, repeat after me to these 4 lines of doctrine, and you're saved. And it's like, I don't know. I just, if there's any formula of anything, I don't, the pure, wild love of the Father is untamable. It's unknowable in the sense of understanding the depths of it. It is, I don't mean it's unknowable outside of the love of God and the love of Jesus, but the depths of it, they go on forever. It's like, it'll be an eternity, us, like even understanding it, like literally it'll be billions and billions and billions of years. And we'll have 1/2 of 1/2 of 1/billionth of a percent of understanding of the nature of the love of God. I mean, that's exciting. Yeah. Man, that's so amazing, right? That is unbelievable. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a God who is just so much better than we are.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I look at it and I think that we paint God in our image. It's like, well, I think sometimes we're like, well, I want, so-and-so wants me to do X, Y, and Z. But in order for me to do X, Y, and Z, they're going to have to do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And then we think God thinks like we do.
We give him our fallibility.
Yes, I think we take our own inadequacies and our own whatever, we project it onto God as if that's how he's like.
Yeah.
Because that's how we are. And it's just like, no, he's not as judgmental and insecure and petty and stupid and all that as we are.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't the God that we serve.
Self-centered.
Yes, self-centered, self-focused, self-driven. As much as we say, let's be selfless and just pray and fast and God will move, it still is about us. It still becomes about our prayer and our fasting, earning it.
And here's my list.
Yeah.
So,
So anyway, I don't know.
my favorite part of the story is the part where the guy's walking by with the basket of bread and he looks at you and says, "Huh, so you're here."
Yeah.
Like he knew you.
Yes.
Like you were supposed to be there.
Yes.
He wasn't shocked. It was more like, okay, so this is cool. It's almost like it's this almost the same reaction on the other end of, well, this is neat.
Yes.
And I mean, there's just something that just the first time you told me, that stuck out and struck me because to me it spoke to, you're a citizen of this village, of this kingdom.
Yeah.
And you're known as that citizen. You belong here, whether you're here physically or not.
Yeah.
You belong here. And that was just so neat to me.
Yeah.
So, which is why they were freaking out.
Yeah. Well, me too. Even at the time, even though I was scared right after that, it still did give me that same sense of peace. Like, okay, like he knows me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a total stranger to this place, which also, that's interesting because maybe we'll talk about this some other time. But that I just shared with Keith a demon dream that someone else had the same dream or the same demon in the dream, and that demon, I forgot to show you this part, knew my name too.
Oh,
like actually addressed me by name, but it didn't. It actually gave me more power because I felt like
they recognized your authority.
Yeah, like I realized, oh, it knows, and I actually kind of puffed my chest out a little bit. I remember in the dream going like, "That's right, you know my name." I mean, but it was, it wasn't like arrogance. Like, it really wasn't.
Doggone right.
Yeah, I know it was, but it really wasn't like arrogance. I wasn't like, but it really was kind of a confidence that I needed to cast the demon out in the dream.
Yeah,
like I needed that confidence. I didn't really fully have it until it was like Nathan, and I was like, "That's right." He knows my name, So it kind of gave me this unction that to like, okay, they know my name. Like I'm, it's on now, kind of thing. Sounds so silly.
So this experience is different than the other ones we've talked about because it almost seems like in the Avengers where whatever the Doctor Strange character hits the Hulk and Bruce Banner comes floating out.
Yeah, it was like that, very much like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what comes to mind when you tell the story, that it is an out of body experience of sorts that would have taken you to perhaps the third heaven. I suppose. I don't know. So,
like there wasn't a sign that was like, you are now entering the third
heaven. Welcome to the third heaven.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly.
So, but it shows us in the pattern of these past few episodes that not every experience is the same.
Oh yeah.
But the outcome of everyone so far has been the same. Number one, you have a greater desire to be with Jesus.
Yes.
And to be who he made you to be, to walk in your identity.
Yes.
And a greater desire to have more of those type of experiences. Now that becomes not the experience itself, but who it's with becomes far more appealing than anything else that you could possibly put your mind or focus on.
Yeah.
The other thing is that it seems to impact your future, like what your true focus is. I'm comparing all the stories that you've told so far. The one that I told last episode, it absolutely impacted me to the point where I'm like, I'm solid on a direction because of that thing, and have had follow-up experiences that supported that. You're similar, where it absolutely changed the way you see people. Your not necessarily your great call, which we'll get to one day.
Oh boy!
But
my great calling,
my great calling.
Sorry.
Never sent by carrier pigeon, by the way. A great calling.
Oh, yes.
So there you go. But with that, those are the similarities, even though the experiences are different. But the out of body experience, we're just a touch over an hour. That's not the only one that you've had. You've had one that was based, I guess, from a dream instead of being awake and it happening. Now,
I've had 3 that I can think of off the top of my head like this, but asleep,
okay,
not awake.
So I'd like to transition perhaps the next episode to dreams and compare those to visions, but this one is so similar in kind of that experience itself. Perhaps quickly you can explain what happened, and so people at least understand that you can have that kind of out of body moment. And it doesn't have to be always when you're awake. Sometimes it can be asleep. It's just as real. And perhaps then after it, help us understand how to process that. Because I got to think for anybody that doesn't have a scroll's worth of experiences, that's got to be pretty freaky. I mean, even you said you felt kind of just odd for a while.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you've had experiences before other than that. So it's got to be pretty jarring, I would think. So if you could just kind of relay that story and then tell us what we're to take from it and, kind of how to process that if we get that opportunity.
Well, I'd also say that every time I have an encounter, it does all the things that you said, but also what it does is it opens up, you become more aware of the spirit realm. So it increases your awareness that, because we're also focused typically in the physical realm, bills, family, marriage, kids, that kind of thing. But what these experiences tend to do is they open your heart and your mind and your awareness of the spirit realm, like more than you ever have. And that's been true of all of them. Like I've become so much more aware, like, okay, this spirit realm is really real. And it really does impact the physical, and the physical impacts the spiritual as well. So although I think one does more than the other, because I think one is greater than the other, and in the sense that one will last forever and one will not. So anyway, I just want to add that it really does increase an awareness of the spirit realm and the spiritual in general.
Which probably impacts a lot of other things. How you think, how you pray, how you see the world around you and beyond, how even probably you process everything from attacks to blessings.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Now, what was your question again? I have
to go. Give us the dream version of being taken out of your body.
Which
one? Might be a great.
Do you want?
Let's go to Palo Alto.
Oh, okay. So this out of body experience I was definitely asleep. So I went to sleep. This was right maybe 2 years after the revival began to die down. So I'm in Colorado, and an angel comes to me, and I know it's an angel. It's just really obvious. And I get literally picked up by the scruff of my neck, so which is so weird. And I get pulled out of my body. And again, the reason I know that is because I could feel myself leaving my body, and I could again see my body as I'm being pulled out very briefly. So I go whoosh, like right through the roof. Again, this isn't a dream. And I get pulled all the way up over America. And so I see this huge map of America, and I could see all the cities, like we're floating way up there. And none of them are labeled, but I knew I was right above Denver. Like it literally just looked like one of those city maps that you see where it's like the lights, like a satellite map. And so I'm literally looking down going, okay, I'm just sort of floating there, being held by the scruff of my neck from this angel. And I go, and we start flying west, and we go directly west of Denver, and we're flying over the mountains. I mean, I can feel the air like zooming through me, and I'm like, oh, like it's really fast. And we stop. This angel stops me over, and I could look down, and then I could see it. Now it's the only city that's labeled, and it says Palo Alto. And I realized, and I could see California. I mean, I knew we were at California, and I'm like, okay, he's dangling me above Palo Alto, California, and I'm like, what is going on here? And he lets me go. So he's holding by the scruff of my neck, lets me go. I go, ah, Like I'm falling down, and I could see myself falling right to Palo Alto, California. So I smack down in Palo Alto, and I realize I'm in the courtyard because I'm in grass. I actually landed on grass. I could feel the grass poking me and itching me on my elbows because I landed like on my elbows and my feet, or in my, how you would land on your butt and your feet come down to my elbows. And I'm like sitting there like, oh, this is really itchy grass. And I was just like, and it was so visceral. I could smell it. I could feel it. It was humid. I was like, everything, at least not more humid than Denver. And I remember looking over my shoulder and I realized I'm in the courtyard of Palo Alto High School. It literally says right there in the front of Palo Alto High School. And so I'm like, and it's a green sign. They had like green letters, and I was thinking, okay, I'm not really sure what to do. So I just kind of get up and I figure, I guess I'll go in the school because this is where I am. So I walk up and I grab the handle. I mean, it was so visceral. I could feel the metal on my hand. I like pull the door open and I walk into Palo Alto High School. There's nobody in there. And I remember, I could smell the school, the floors, the hallways were green, like a dark green. All the hallway floors were like this dark green. Now, I just want everybody to know, prior to this encounter, I not only had never been to Palo Alto, California, I'd never even heard of Palo Alto, California. I literally have never heard of that in my life. Like if somebody were to say, do you know where Palo Alto is? I would have been like, probably in Arizona because it sounds like a Hispanic name. Like that's probably what I would have said. Like I'd never even heard of Palo Alto before. So now I'm in this hallway and all the floors are green and everything. And Heidi Baker comes walking around the corner. Now, if you're someone who doesn't know who Heidi Baker is, she's a real big evangelist in Mozambique. They've planted, her and her husband, Roland, have planted like 10,000 churches. They feed like 10,000 orphans a day food. God is just really moving over there. They've seen a cajillion miracles, people coming to Christ like right and left. So she's just a really, really big evangelist over there. So anyway, she comes around the corner and she kind of comes around limping. She looks very tired, like totally exhausted. And she puts her hand on my shoulder as she comes around the corner and looks up at me. And she is also with an angel. I forgot about this part. There's an angel walking next to her and almost kind of helping her, but because she's so tired. But she puts her hand on my shoulder and she looks me right in the eyes and she goes, Nathan, I've prepared the ground for you. You have to now make it happen, or basically take it over. Continue what I'm doing because it's almost through to fruition, is basically what she was saying. She was like, I've prepared the ground. You're going to have to take it all the rest of the way. And upon that, she just kind of disappears with her angel, like walks around the corner and disappears with her angel friend. And I'm just standing there in the hallway of Palo Alto High School, smelling it, seeing the green floor, realizing that, okay, somehow I have to bring revival to this high school that I'm now stuck in because I'm here. Like I can feel it. I can see it. It is so real. And somehow I have to finish Heidi Baker's work because it's going to bring revival to this high school. And it was like from that high school, revival was going to explode all over the earth. So it was going to be, it's kind of like the Jesus People movement where it was like birthed in Southern California, particularly in Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And it kind of exploded. It was like that. It was going to be at Palo Alto High School. I was going to help it, bring it to fruition, and it was going to explode. And then right then, whoosh, I'm pulled back out, zoomed across, dropped back into my body, and I wake up. And I'm like, what in the heck? So, of course, I Google it, and that's when I almost passed out because I Google it, Palo Alto High School, and sure enough, it looks exactly how it was in my vision, the green floors, a whole 9 yards.
I just did. That's what I was doing.
Did you see it?
Yeah. It was, first of all, a beautiful school.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it was.
I'm a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
But it's, their colors are green. Their graduation gowns and caps are green.
Did you see the floor of the school?
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
It's like a dark green. Yeah. I mean, it was totally weird. So I had this experience. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was actually in the school.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, what do you do with that exactly? Like, how do you process something like that? Like, how does that, because people think, well, you go into prayer or you whatever. But I found sometimes if you pray too much, you focus too much on it. Do you want to get into this maybe next episode?
No, this is good.
You don't want to wait till next episode?
No, we gotta follow this one through.
Okay. So I've noticed that if you focus, this is my own experience. So
Yeah.
if you focus too much on it, it almost becomes like obsessive. In other words, you almost focus too much on the experience and you almost lose Jesus.
You okay?
I'm not saying that happens to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that can happen because it has happened to me where you'll have these encounters. In fact, it happened with this particular one. So I had this, it was the first time ever that I'd been out of my body. It was the first time ever I'd been somewhere else and picked up. So obviously I was pretty shaken by it. And I'm thinking, this is, the will of God for my life. So I've got to go to Palo Alto and start a revival. Like I didn't know what that meant exactly. But I just spent hours and hours in prayer, like every aspect of it. Like, Lord, lead them to Jesus. I'm praying for Palo Alto. Lord, let the revival start here and spread there, or start there and spread here, whatever. Blah, blah. I don't know how long I probably did that for like 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks, I really felt the Lord be like, Nathan, chill out. Like that's literally what I felt. Like Holy Spirit's like, you need to relax. Like you're going a little weird with this. So although I do believe that prayer obviously into it, coming before Lord is very, very important. Too much of a focus, I think, can be not good. It can be like detrimental. So a lot of them, I say, write them down for sure. Put the date and the time if you have it, and absolutely write it down in great detail so that you have it. And that way you know it and you have it, and you pray about it as God leads.
Yeah.
Right? So as he would lead, or maybe something, who knows? Someday someone might call me up and go, we want you to speak at Palo Alto High School. I don't know. Or maybe a Palo Alto High School student will call me. I don't know what will happen. But I'll have that. I'll have it there. And as God leads, you pray into it. But you just kind of release it. Like you don't want to get too weird about it.
So you don't just pack up the family and head to California.
No.
Like
I think
the
that
Beverly
would be
Hillbillies.
horribly unwise. And also, we got to remember with prophetic encounters, you have to look up, like, what does Palo Alto mean?
Okay.
And I forget what it means now. It means like tall because alto is tall. It means like tall something. Tall Palo. Whatever that is.
It's a real tall Palo.
So there was, things like that. So you kind of have to look up. And I looked up the actual city is an incredibly rich city.
Okay.
In fact, it's one of the richest cities in the world. And so only the people that go to Palo Alto High School are very, very wealthy because this is like Silicon Valley.
Okay.
So now we're looking at, Silicon Valley, the center of sort of technology and creativity.
So it could be representative of something.
So I thought in a general sense, I would think it would be representative of something. The only reason I thought it would be more than representative is because of the fact that I was there.
And it was so real.
It was so real. So that made me be like, this is actually that place. As opposed to a dream, if I just dreamt that, and it was just really a dream, I didn't have, I dreamt that I was there, and I dreamt how to be bigger, blah, blah. Then I would think of a dream in that sense would be more meaning something else, more representative. Maybe God is saying like the center of creativity, the center of, like wealth and creativity and technology and advancement. Like this is where revival, kind of the nature of revival or something like that. I'm not saying any of that is true necessarily about this encounter, but I would say that's what I would think more, as opposed to the physically being there. It was like, no, this is more than that.
And perhaps that's another trend, because so far in just discussing the experiences, it doesn't ever seem to be exactly what it is that you're seeing. Like the horses, when I talked about it last episode, were people. And I was led to believe that in what he told me. Right. Here, Palo Alto may be representative of something else. The babies representing identity, not youth necessarily.
Right. Or not just those particular guys, and that was it.
So I think that. So I can see how writing it down would not only help you remember it, but help you process it, especially if you look back. Now, I do think, and I'm sure we'll get into this in other episodes, that there are times where the Lord is very specific, and he has been with me, to eerily so, like to the point where you're like, wow, I wish I would have gone to Vegas and put money on that. That's how spot on what he would tell me would be.
Totally. Yeah.
But other times where you've kind of have to process it. I guess my question here is, how do you know when it is something that you really need to process through when it isn't specific, like Palo Alto? How do you know in the moment, or do you know in the moment?
And are you asking in the moment if I know
if it's real. So let's say somebody has a vision
Okay.
or a dream now. Like you even take the one, the eye was there.
Okay.
I'll just take that because it was. I mean, it's so vivid for me. Obviously,
Yeah.
like I knew that it wasn't actual horses
Right.
that I'm dealing with.
Right.
I knew it was I knew it was people,
Right.
and I was assured of that. For
Just
you,
as Holy Spirit probably isn't a literal cloud.
yeah,
Right,
exactly.
same thing.
If for you there was a moment though, at least for a few weeks, where you thought it was literally Palo Alto High School,
Mm-hmm.
but then came to the realization that hold on a minute, this is perhaps representative of something else.
Right.
So the best way to process through that, other than writing it down, is what? Just to ask.
Well, I think that's a good process to go through right there. Is like, in other words, like the first thing is to go physical, literal. So the first thing I think to do is take a look at it and go, okay, God, is this literal? Are you telling me something one for one? Like I literally need to go to Palo Alto High School. Like, is that literally what you're saying? And then pray about it and lift it up. Most of the time, he'll probably say no. And then you move on to like, okay, if that isn't literal, then what could it possibly mean?
Okay.
Then you can start looking up things like, what does Palo Alto mean? Like literally, what does Palo Alto, the city, like? What is the high school like? That kind of stuff. And then get more nuanced, So I think you should always, in my opinion, start with the physical, the literal, and go like, okay, is this literally what is happening here? Most of the time, that will not be the case. Now, sometimes it is, but in my experience, most of the time it isn't. Most of the time it represents something else that God is trying to communicate to your spirit. And also, I think we also need to understand that a lot of things, like the Bible says, can only be spiritually discerned, right? That's what Scripture says. And so I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that we go through these encounters, and it's not so much that we mentally, cognitively, in a full awareness capacity understand it. I think it's our spirit understands it. And I think our spirit understands 100%, whether our minds fully grasp it or not. And that is the point sometimes. And I think that's okay. Like I said, that one in particular, I still feel it. I still carry it. Just like the John Wimber one. I still feel it and I still carry it. My spirit 100% knows what that means. I know that it knows because I can feel inside my spirit gets it. Now, do I understand? Am I mentally, physically, cognitively aware? No. Like I still have a lot of questions. I still don't understand it. And I'm not saying it's that we don't need to or it's unimportant that we do, but I think it's more important that we understand our spirit absolutely does understand, and that a lot of these things are given to us as gifts by the Lord, and our spirit is getting it 100%. Now, does that mean we don't need to dig for it? No, I think we should dig for it, just like a parable. We kind of have to like dig through parables, and is there layers to this? And what does that mean? And that's good. I think that's a good process because we've always said God hides things for us, not from us. It's not like God's hiding things from you. He hides it for you. And in the process of seeking that out actually forms you to be able to receive what you find.
Do you think that we are to expect in time or at the appropriate time for our minds and our physical self to then get the understanding that our spirit already has?
I think so. I think that almost, I don't know, always it would happen, but I think it definitely happens a lot. I'll give you a good example. If
yeah, absolutely.
So this is my dad's example. So we were, I want to say, okay, so 6 months, a year before we moved to Denver. I think it was a year before we moved to Denver. And my dad had a dream. And in the dream, there was a newspaper article. And in the newspaper article, it said, Pastor Lauren Sanford is coming to Denver, Colorado. And by the way, back in the day, like 100 million years ago, newspapers used to introduce if a new pastor was coming to town, especially a small town.
Okay.
So if a small town had a new pastor coming, it would literally have a whole article on Pastor so-and-so.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal back then. Is taking over such and such church or whatever. So that's how the article presented itself. So my dad actually opened the paper, and in there was his name. Pastor Lawrence Sanford is coming to Denver, Colorado. He's going to plant such and such church, blah, 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 blah. Well, of course, at the time that it happened, Dad was kind of like, well, that's weird. Like, what am I to make of that? And so he had no idea. So he started to kind of like make it a metaphor like we're doing now. Like, well, maybe, God just wants to announce me via the paper. That's kind of like my name getting out there. Maybe God wants to spread my name out there. And Denver's a mile-high city, so maybe he just wants to elevate my name. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he started doing that. But in fact, that wasn't the case at all. In fact, it literally happened. So 6 months later, or something like that, I don't remember the exact timeline, but something like that, Tom Stipe from Denver, Colorado, who was the senior pastor of the Denver Vineyard at the time, asked my dad to come and take the executive pastor position at the Denver, Colorado church. So literally that God was showing my dad, this is actually what you're going to do. The paper will show that you're coming and you're going to go to Denver as a pastor and be announced, which is exactly what happened. So, in that case, it was like trying to make it a metaphor because he didn't understand it. But in fact, It was literal, and it just needed time to unfold. So,
wow. So, here's what we've learned so far today. Number one, whatever you're praying for, when you come at it from a place of peace and joy and genuine fellowship through the heart, relationship from the heart, that's when the impact happens. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not necessarily about God being ready. It's about you being ready for what he already has for you.
Yeah.
We've learned that it's good to write these things down for a number of reasons. I have to say that I don't yet have a scroll, but I do.
Maybe you will, Keith.
But I do. Notice I said yet, but I do have a journal. It looks more like the Raiders of the Lost Ark Last Crusade.
All right.
Right, journal.
Yeah.
So there you go. I'm waiting for all the things. No Knights Templar, but I'll put the others.
Oh yeah.
So and we've learned that not everything is literal, although it may be literal. So the real thing is focus more on Jesus than the experience, and pray through it, because your spirit knows what it's supposed to know, and it will be revealed when the rest of you needs to know what that was supposed to mean. Correct?
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty much always the case.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we most likely, even without the 50 million stories, we could probably do 10 more podcasts on visions and experiences that probably would fall in at least how we're categorizing visions. But I think it's probably time to transition in our next episode to dreams, because they're similar, but they're very, obviously, because when you're asleep and when you're not asleep, but they are very different. In other ways. And, I think the question, just like with visions, is it biblical? And what do we do with this? And how do we process this? And how do you interpret these things? So I think we can get into that in the next episode, and that might be enlightening for some people. We've already said in our family, I've had the 2-3 I was there experiences that kind of fall into that visions as we've talked about them. But Alice has far more dreams than I do. I've had maybe a handful of those, and she's had and most of which for some reason have had you as the topic. So I dream about you. There we go. 80s reference.
I can't hold you tonight.
So anyway, some people that are prophetic have different, experiences than others. Right. So that's certainly Alice. And we can get into those things next time. But until then, if you want to bring up any requests for topics or ask questions, which, by the way, we have received some.
Yes, we have. We've received quite a few.
We're going to jump into those. I think right after probably the dream episode.
Yeah.
We can jump into probably the next one, which might be baptism.
Oh, yeah. I think that'd be good. We got to hit up baptism for sure.
There we go.
A lot of confusion there.
Yeah, so we're gonna answer the age-old question: sprinkle or dunk,
Sprinkle, dunk, or spray.
or spray.
Yes.
So there's so many options.
Yes.
So, if you also have a question or a desire to ask for a topic to be covered, one way you can reach out is
unleashedministries.net, and go ahead and click on the Ask Me, and all your questions will be answered.
there we go. Like Zoltar and Big.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That was a good one.
or you can go to rocksaltcoaching.com, contact us, or the Rock Salt Facebook page. And before we go, Nathan has already alluded to this. On February 19th, we will be starting the first course of Basileia.
Woohoo.
And if you would like to be involved, we are starting that here in the Concord, Charlotte, North Carolina area. Eventually, we will be moving, Lord willing, to some sort of hybrid or virtual option as well. But we want to make sure that things are done right.
Right.
That they're done the right way, because it's more important for us to do it in a way that's impactful, in the way that the Lord leads us, instead of getting ahead of things and just doing it for the sake of doing it, and just adding things on for the sake of adding it. So we're being very deliberate, very intentional about everything that we do, really. So for those of you who have asked, hey, can I be a part of that? I'm nowhere near North Carolina. Yes, but not right now.
Right.
But for those that are in the North Carolina area and want to be involved, go to basileianc.com. It's BASILEIAN, like November, C like Charlie, .com, and go to the register page, and you can see a little bit more about the courses when they start and register accordingly. So looking forward to that. Anything you want to say about Basileia?
I was just going to say that the Basileia, of course, is just for girls. We'll have a Bossy Luke. Sorry, I had to do the dad joke. I had to. I couldn't stay off it. I had to do it.
There is another.
Yes. Her name is Basileia.
That is so great. I will forever think of that. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We really appreciate you, far more than we can tell you. And if our greatest hope really is for none of this to be about us, certainly we have a good time doing this, but this is all about Jesus and just really living in the joy and the freedom and the peace and just the
Thank you, Lord.
awesomeness of who he is in the kingdom, and the fact that he's brought us into it. So our greatest desire is that this glorifies him, that it opens people's hearts and eyes and minds to who he really is and who now you are in the kingdom, so you can really live life abundantly in that same peace and joy.
Yes.
And hopefully that's happening, and we just appreciate you going along that journey with us.
Thank you, Lord.
All right. See you next episode.